Hello friends, good afternoon. I welcome you all to another edition of Daily News Analysis. So in this particular edition, we are going to discuss some very important articles. But before that, let me tell you the story of Po in Kung Fu Panda. Particularly, you must have all seen that very good animated movie about the panda warrior and how he actually realizes his own potential. So I remember one of the incident and one of the dialogue between Po and his obviously the adopted father, and essentially the conversation goes like this. So what Po asks his father is, father, what is the secret ingredient? What is the secret? So essentially the Po's father, the adopted father, you must have all seen that particular character also. He sells very good noodles. So essentially very tasty noodles. So that's why Po asks very interestingly, what is the secret? What exactly is the secret ingredient? So the answer given by his father at that point of time is very telling, and it may it gives very important lessons when it comes to this particular UPSC preparation for you also. So what the father says is, the secret is there is no secret. It's you. It's always within. It is always within you. So that's the case. So secret to UPSC success is always within you. See, there are three fundamental principles here. So essentially consistency over intensity, that is very important. So UPSC particularly demands consistency. More consistent, more disciplined you are over the period of time, the better chances of you getting selected in this particular exam in your earliest attempt. Obviously the first attempt should be your best. So for that particular thing to happen with you, if you are in your first attempt, remember consistency is the key. Be disciplined. Just focus on day to day sort of hardships. So essentially, but consistency is very important. Another important thing to remember here is sort of perfection over progress. So that is also very important. Focus on daily little progress. Do not run behind perfection. Nobody knows what exactly is the perfect answer in this particular exam. Particularly in mains, nobody knows. Neither there are any sort of model answers that are given by UPSC also. So focus on the daily progress that you can get in this regard. And obviously the most important is fundamentals over fad. So essentially focus more on fundamental clarity. So I think these three, if I want to tell you some ingredients of success, so these are three ingredients particularly that are very important when it comes to UPSC success. Always focus on conceptual clarity. So after giving you this particular sermon, let's get back to the topics that we are going to discuss today. So in the explain section, particularly the prelim section, we are going to take a look at very good and very important articles from the Hindu as well as Indian Express newspapers. Like the first important obviously article is about the Constitution Day celebrations. We have all seen the images in our Samvidhan of the celebration of Samvidhan Divas in the parliament particularly. So very important, the speeches given by our president, prime minister, what vice president has said. Sometimes they give you some sort of indication as well that what are the priorities of the current government, and apart from that some historical aspects and historical personalities also you will get to know. Obviously the why we celebrate the Constitution Day on 26th of November, important from the perspective of prelims. Particularly UPSC has asked question on Constitution Day already in particularly 2023 prelims. So important article. The second is scheme for rare earth magnets. So the cabinet has approved this particular scheme. Very important, China dominates this space of rare earths. So essentially India's response in this regard is very vital. So scheme for rare earth magnets has been launched. So substantial amount has been invested now. So we are going to see what sort of result we will get when it comes to production of rare earth magnets in India. So so very important update from the perspective of prelims, particularly rare earth related element, updates, and also the science behind it, the technology associated is always important obviously. Another important article we are going to take a look at is creation of Goa Tiger Reserve. So, important analysis again from the perspective of particularly environment in GS3. This particular article holds very vital importance. See, from the perspective of prelims particularly, the location of wildlife sanctuaries, national parks is a favorite area for UPSC. So, essentially this particular article gives you very important wildlife sanctuaries from say Goa, the state of Goa. Apart from that, very important tiger reserve, Kali Tiger Reserve, that is from northern Karnataka as well. So, what exactly is the issue? Why Goa particularly oppose the creation of tiger reserve in its territory? Important update from again prelims as well as mains perspective. Another important article that we are going to take a look at is RBI planning monthly release of BOP data. So, very important update here from the perspective of GS3 economy. Particularly the deputy governor has said they are going to release, RBI particularly going to release BOP data on a monthly basis. Now, the data happens, the release of data happens on a quarterly basis. So, going forward we may see more granular data on a monthly basis. So, very important from the perspective of GS3, particularly monetary policy questions you may get in prelims as well as mains. Another important article is about India's FX regime crwal-like IMF. So, IMF has designated India's FX here means foreign exchange regime as a crwal-like. So, see means when I discussed last time in DNA about rupees fall, at that point of time also I told you some of the types of foreign exchange regimes, essentially currency exchange regimes. There are certain types specific to IMF. So, IMF has also given its also classifies currency exchange regime in certain types. So, now what the RBI has done, it has reclassified India's foreign exchange or currency exchange regime as a crwal-like. So, we are going to see what exactly is the crwal-like mean, what are some of the other regimes there are. Obviously, there is largely it is a pegged regime and then there is a floating regime. So, there are subtypes associated with that. So, IMF also classifies somewhat similar in that way. We are going to see what are the other classification associated with say currency exchange regime, foreign exchange regime as well. Another important update from the perspective of majorly prelims is Ahmedabad to host CWG 2030. So, Commonwealth Games 2030 host has been announced. Ahmedabad has won the bid to actually host 2030 Commonwealth Games. So, important from particularly from the perspective of prelims, UPSC nowadays has habit of asking sports related update, that is we have seen in last few years. In decoded section that is important for mains, we are going to take a look at very important articles. The first article is about Juno, INO versus Juno on neutrino. So, important particular article from the perspective of science and technology. See, this particular analysis is very important. Particularly we all know India Neutrino Observatory, it is in news since last 4 to 5 years since its announcement, but it hasn't gone anywhere. There is local opposition there in Tamil Nadu, particularly opposition by tribal people there. So, that is why that particular project of building the neutrino observatory has stalled. But on the other hand, China's Juno mission on the neutrino particularly not on the neutrino science particularly has taken off. So, essentially China has surpassed India in this regard, although India actually got a head start, but it is not able to materialize on it. So, very important update from the perspective of science and technology here. Another important article that we are going to take a look at is about mental health and reproductive rights. So, there are it is also very specific and interesting debate here about say medical termination of pregnancy and how the particular exception of mental health is being interpreted by different high courts differently, and what exactly the Supreme Court has said when it comes to mental health of say mental health of pregnant women, of women in general, is important in this article. So, important analysis from the perspective of GS2 health, particularly GS1 women related issues also, Indian society part. This particular article is important. So, stay tuned for mains analysis as well. So, the first important article is about Constitution Day celebration. So, we have all seen the pictures, our Prime Minister, President celebrating this particular Samvidhan Divas in the Parliament Bhavan, Parliament House. So, essentially we have the PYQ here, very important PYQ from 2023, the direct PYQ that is asked. Just go through the PYQ and pause the video if you want to attempt this particular PYQ. It directly asks the questions on the celebration of Constitution Day. In statement 1 particularly, it says that Constitution Day is celebrated on 26 November every year. That is true, very important days when it comes to the celebrations of our constitution. Particularly the statement 2 argues that on 26 November 1949, the Constituent Assembly of India set up a drafting committee under the chairmanship of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar to prepare a draft constitution of India. See, the most important aspect here is on 26 November 1949, we adopted the constitution. Way before that, in 1947 particularly, there was a drafting of the committee and the drafting started in 1947. So, this particular statement here is incorrect. So, you will obviously have the answer here, that is C. Statement 1 is correct, but statement 2 is incorrect. So, some sort of history here, history of the formation of our constitution, the initial days of the Constituent Assembly and what sort of debates there are. So, some debates are important, but from the perspective of prelims particularly, knowing the basics of the celebration, apart from that the speeches that are given by our constitutional sort of heads are important. See, the first and foremost is about the President's speech. So, President, some of the important themes I am going to discuss here of what President said. You can utilize her statements directly in your answers as well. So, what she said in her speech is the Constitution is the document of our national pride and a guiding text for taking the country forward with a nationalist mindset by abandoning the colonial mindset. So, this particular statement is important. You can utilize such statement directly in your answers. Apart from that, what she said is Constitution is a text of our national identity. So, you can utilize these sort of text or these sort of statements directly in your essays, in your answers in GS2. So, the intro, when you use such quotes effectively in your answers, it overall increases the effectiveness of the answers as well. So, just note down some of the statements of the President. Apart from that, what is the speech's focus is also very important. So, obviously what she said is India's constitution is an inclusive document. It is a document which gives us inclusive democracy, very true. Empowerment of vulnerable section, the welfare state is one of the DPSP particularly. Apart from that, adult franchise, India is one of the foremost countries to start its democracy or constitutional democracy journey on the basis of adult franchise for all without any sort of discrimination. Otherwise, in earlier democracies there are always restrictions on who can vote. Particularly suffragette movement in US in that regard is very famous. But India, when it started its constitutional democratic journey post 1950, started it with adult franchise. So, that is very important, and that is a big gamble taken by the Indian constitution makers at that point of time. But they trusted, they believed in the wisdom of Indian population. Although at that point of time the literacy rate of overall Indian population is only 18%, 17 to 18%. So, essentially you can clearly see the trust that are bestowed upon us as a people by the constitution makers. So, right to vote here is very important, So, all of us must utilize this particular constitutional duty. Although right to vote is not a fundamental right, but it is constitutional right. Essentially it is a statutory right as well, according to various Supreme Court judgments. It is a statutory right as well as we can call it a constitutional right, because it is mentioned in the constitution as well. So, essentially balance of power is something another theme that has emerged from say the from the president's speech. Apart from that, vision of India by 2047, essentially develop India vision, that also she talked about. Ideals like social, economic and political justice, liberty, equality and fraternity are the soul of the constitution. So, this also statement is very important. As I said, some of the statement you can directly utilize in your answers. Passage of Nari Shakti Vandan Adhiniyam, as well as you know 3 laws related to the criminal justice system are also mentioned by the president in her speech as the as an important acts towards women led development, women empowerment and to decolonize our mindset. So, very important speech given by our president on the occasion of Samvidhan Divas. See, there is another important appeal by the Prime Minister also. So, what he said is also very vital and important. So, some of the important themes from his speech are that he focused on say duties. So, he says that rights emanate from duties. So, essentially he quotes Mahatma Gandhi here. Gandhi also believed rights over duties, duties over rights. Essentially what is the argument here is rights arose from duties. So, essentially fundamental duties, following our constitutional fundamental duties are very vital and important. So, apart from that, another important theme emerged from his speech is power of our constitution to empower the weakest. He gave his own example, like the tea seller becoming the prime minister of India, and that is the power that is bestowed on each and every one of the Indian, that he can reach the highest echelons of power if he wants. So, essentially personalities and events mentioned in his speech, this is also very important by the way. Rajendra Prasad and Ambedkar's contribution he lauded. Apart from that, birth anniversaries of Sardar Patel, particularly 150th birth anniversary of Sardar Patel. So, the contribution of Sardar Patel is very important from the perspective of prelims as well as mains. So, prepare it properly. Bhagwan Birsa Munda, this particular figure is also very important, very revered figure when it comes to tribals, particularly 150th anniversary of the Vande Mataram also. So, we have in recent times we have seen the DNA on this particular topic as well. Vande Mataram completing 150 years of its form of its writing. Another important personality that is mentioned is 350th martyrdom of say Guru Tegh Bahadur ji. So, 350th martyrdom anniversary of Guru Tegh Bahadur. So, these are very very personalities. You may get a direct mains questions on these personalities as well. So, keep a tab on these personalities and events and their contributions from the perspective of history as well. You may get a question in prelims as well as mains directly. Apart from that, let us look at some of the basics from the Prime Minister's speech. So, he focused more on fundamental duties. See, fundamental duties are originally not part of our constitution. So, Indian constitution does not mention, originally does not mention, the text does not mention fundamental duties at all. So, it is an addition from say 1970s particularly. So, essentially the fundamental duties were added by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act. So, the fundamental duties were added by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1976 on the recommendation of Swaran Singh Committee. So, remember these important facts about the fundamental duties. Swaran Singh Committee recommendations, on this particular committee's recommendations, the FDs, the fundamental duties were included in our constitution. So, they were inserted under Article 51A. So, this is also important. Originally, there are 10 fundamental duties, but 11th was added by the 86th Constitutional Amendment Act of 2002 about education, the primary education stuff. So, this particular fundamental duty was added. So, there are now 11 fundamental duties that are mentioned under Article 51A, and it introduced new part 4A as well. So, these are some of the specifics which are important from the perspective of prelims. particularly remember all these specifics. As I earlier said, so the Prime Minister actually lauded the contribution of recently eligible voters to right to vote movement as well. For example, in India we have at age of 18 right to vote, but see means when the constitution actually was implemented in 1950, right to vote the age was 21. So essentially from 21 to 18 the constitution amendment in that regard happened in 1988. So this particular constitution amendment is the Constitution 61st Amendment Act of 1988. Voting age reduced from 21 to 18. So important fact, remember this particular fact as well. So very vital. So these are some of the important facts about the fundamental duties and our constitutional amendment when it comes to the voting age reduction. So another important theme that is emerged from the celebrations is CJI's appeal, Chief Justice of India. So what he appealed for is Chief Justice of India Surya Kant on Wednesday pushed for a uniform and national judicial policy to reinforce predictability in judicial approach among the Supreme Court and state high courts. So essentially there needs to be some sort of uniform judicial policy. That's what the CJI bats for, so that there is it would encourage coherence and jurisdictions will bring more clarity. As I earlier said, there will be many times there are disputes, jurisdictional disputes between different high courts. There are many times disputes when it comes to interpretation of the law also. So CJI here bats for the uniform national judicial policy, so that there is some sort of coherence and the cooperative federalism, the spirit of cooperative federalism particularly also sort of emanates in judiciary as well. So very important appeal given by the CJI also. So how 26th November came to be celebrated as India's Constitution Day? This important article, this important point is also very important here. So on 26th November 1949 we actually adopted the Constitution of India, and it came into effect on 26th January 1950. So on this particular day we celebrate Republic Day, but on November 26th we celebrate Samvidhan Divas, and this particular Samvidhan Divas was formally notified on 19 November 2015. So very important, since 2015 we are celebrating this Samvidhan Divas. So why particularly 2015 we started celebrating it is also because it was the 125th birth anniversary of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the chairman of the drafting committee of the Constitution. So father of our Constitution, essentially he has 125th birth anniversary falling on in 2015. So that's why to celebrate his legacy for the constitution making, as well as to actually designate this particular very important day from the history of India, so that we can recognize the worth of our constitution, the government in 2015 started the Constitution Day celebrations. So remember these particular important aspects as well. So this is very important practice question for you. Just comment your answer in the comment section to this particular question. Apart from that, this particular question is also very important, very easy questions. By the way, UPSC may ask such type of questions as well. So just comment your answer to these two questions. So another important article that we are going to discuss is about, say, the scheme for rare earths magnets. So the government has announced, the cabinet has approved new scheme of 7280 crore rupees for rare earth magnets. So as we have earlier seen, the rare earth elements, and we have discussed in our earlier DNA episodes also what exactly are rare earth elements and what exactly are rare earth magnets. So what the government has actually announced now is the new scheme that we are focusing on, say, the production of rare earth magnets. So we are trying to be Atmanirbhar in rare earth magnets as well. So essentially, obviously when it comes to PYQs, we have the PYQs on rare earth elements, particularly from 25 itself. You can clearly see the PYQ here. If you want, you can pause the video and try to attempt this particular PYQ, by the way. So very important article here. The scheme is very vital. So, what exactly is this scheme and what is the outlay of this particular scheme is also important to know here. So, we are going to see some of the specifics of the scheme here. So, scheme was announced by the cabinet. The name of the scheme is Scheme to Promote Manufacturing of Sintered Rare Earth Permanent Magnets. So, we all know what exactly are rare earth permanent magnets. So, that pretty much is clear, but what exactly is sintered? So, sintered here means it is a process of say formation of rare earth permanent magnets. We are not going to go into too much details of sintering process. So, essentially through sintering process we will get to the rare earth magnets. So, sintering process is one of the process in the formation of rare earth permanent magnets. So, that much information is enough particularly. So, that is why the name sintered is there, because we are specifically through this particular method we are making these rare earth permanent magnets. That is why they have included in the name itself. Another important scheme is, another important theme of this particular scheme is, it is a push to secure India's supply of rare earth magnets. The Union Cabinet approved this particular scheme of 7 to 8 with the outlay of 7 to 80 crore, so that we get these particular very important magnets manufactured in India. What are the objectives and targets? That is also important. So, establish 6,000 metric tons per annum of integrated REPM manufacturing capacity. So, that is very important. 6,000 metric tons of rare earth permanent magnets, that is our initial target. Strengthen self-reliance and position India as a major player in the global REPM. Build an indigenous supply chain for sectors like EVs and renewable energies also. See, most of the time this particular aspect is important from the perspective of India's own energy security also, because as I earlier said, China dominates this particular sphere. So, essentially from the perspective of strategic autonomy also, this particular aspect is very important of say reducing our reliance on Chinese dominance of say rare earth elements as well as magnets. So, this is very important from the perspective of national energy security as well, and obviously whenever there is energy security, there is obviously national security element as well. So, that is why this particular scheme is important. So, you can clearly see the scheme structure here. So, the capacity subsidy is there is incentive support, there is beneficiary allocation also, that is there. Maximum allocation is given as well, maximum allocation up to 1200 MTPA each. So, we are focusing on diversifying our own suppliers domestically also, so that one entity does not dominate this particular strategic sector. So, total duration is 7 years. So, this particular aspect is also important. So, scheme is targeted, it is not open ended, so that in 7 years we have certain sort of manufacturing capacity being there in India. So, very important scheme from say the perspective of national as well as strategic security of India. So, as I earlier said, China dominates the supply chains of rare earth magnets particularly. So, essentially these rare earth magnets are very much essential for our development of new technologies in EVs particularly. So, essentially we all know that the magnets that are used in EVs, these are very permanent magnets and these are rare earth magnets, and they are prepared from rare earth oxides particularly, and there are many types of these particular magnets, but 2 or 3 magnets are very prominent here, which are majorly used in say EVs and other sort of productions of batteries as well to certain extent. So, let us look at the global aspect here, or before that let us look at what exactly are sintered rare earth permanent magnets. So, as I earlier said, sintering is the process of producing the REPMs, that is rare earth permanent magnets. So, what exactly is this process? It is a powder metallurgy process where powdered alloys are compressed and heated at high temperature to form solid magnets with extreme high magnetic strength. So, this is one of the method of say forming the REPMs particularly. So, it is one of the methods. So, it is one way we can have the rare earth permanent magnets, because it through this particular process there is increase in magnetic strength of these permanent magnets as well. China controls 80 to 90% of the global rare earth element supply, including its mining and manufacturing and sintered REPMs as well. Mostly there are very important types of earth, rare earth magnets particularly. You can clearly see some of these important magnets we have already discussed. These neodymium iron boron magnets, samarium cobalt magnet is also very prominently used nowadays. Just go through this particular slide here, very important. Why are they important? Obviously they are vital part of modern technologies, including electric vehicles, wind turbines, electronic smartphone, medical equipments. Everywhere we are using rare earth magnets. In even rare earth elements are getting used in each of these sectors. So, essentially even in smallest of quantities they are very important. So, that is why whoever controls supply chain of rare earth essentially controls the overall energy security of the world. That is why whole world is trying to diversify away from China. So, we have seen the efforts from US as well, from Japan particularly. Japan to a certain extent has less reliance on China when it comes to rare earths. That particular analysis also we have seen in our earlier DNA episodes. So, this is very important practice question. Just comment your answer in the comment section. So, let us look at the next article. So, next article is about the panel or Supreme Court panel suggesting creation of Goa Tiger Reserve in phases. So, very important from the perspective of GS3 environment here, the creation of Tiger Reserve in Goa particularly. Goa does not have Tiger Reserve currently. Very important from the perspective of prelims here. See, most of the time UPSC will ask you the question on Tiger Reserve and its location. So, you must know in which state there are no tiger reserves at all, or which state has highest number of tiger reserve. So, this particular data and such points are also very important. Although Goa does not have a tiger reserve, we are going to get we are going to see whether Supreme Court in this regard, what sort of decision Supreme Court takes, whether it allows formation of new tiger reserve in Goa by combining the wildlife sanctuaries that are there. So, essentially the Supreme Court monitored or Supreme Court appointed committee in this regard, empowered committee, central empowered committee has recommended the phased actually formation of Goa Tiger Reserve. So, very important. So, but where exactly is this all started? But before that, let us look at the what sort of wildlife sanctuaries that will be included in the Goa Tiger Reserve. So, essentially what was the background of this particular case is the Bombay High Court judgment, particularly Bombay High Court in July 2023 directed the Goa state government to notify 5 protected areas as a tiger reserve within 3 months. Then Goa approached Supreme Court challenging this particular order of the Bombay High Court. Then Supreme Court actually formed this central empowered committee, and now the central empowered committee has given the recommendation. So, central empowerment committee has said that the Goa Tiger Reserve can be formed in a phased manner, if not at once. So, what the central empowered committee, or rather Bombay High Court earlier has suggested is the inclusion of these important wildlife sanctuary from Goa in the tiger reserve. So, essentially there is a Mahadevi Wildlife Sanctuary, Bhagwan Mahavir Wildlife Sanctuary, Bhagwan Mahavir National Park, Netravali Wildlife Sanctuary and Kotigaon Wildlife Sanctuary. All these are very important wildlife sanctuaries in Goa, as well as national park. There is one national park in Goa, that is Bhagwan Mahavir National Park as well. So, essentially there is an element of to what extent there is a tiger fixed tiger population in Goa. The Goan government argues, the Goa state government argues that Goa does not have any fixed sort of tiger population. So, essentially no resident tigers are found in Goa. So, it may not benefit the formation of tiger reserve may not benefit the tiger population at all, because it is just a transient population that passes through Goa. So, that sort of argument is not accepted by the central empowered committee. why Goa government is worried is because it will claim nearly 1 lakh people. Essentially, it will claim the residence of nearly 1 lakh people. So, essentially it will claim the residence of, or it will include the residence of nearly 1 lakh people under its proposed tiger reserve. So, that is the reason that Goa is opposing. See, Goa is a very small state and nestled in sort of Western Ghats. It is very important tiger corridor. To certain extent, the Goa government worries that if the tiger reserve is declared, there is sort of opposition by local population as well, because obviously reserve declaration of tiger reserve, that too including all these wildlife sanctuaries, will include an element of say core tiger reserve, core zone and buffer zone, and there will be restrictions on activities as well, and development may suffer in this regard, or there may be local population opposition as well. So, that is why there is opposition by the Goa government particularly. So, essentially the CEC recommended the phased implementation of the tiger reserve essentially. So, you can clearly see the tiger reserve, the phased approach that is recommended by the central committee. So, essentially what the central committee argues is areas contiguous to Karnataka's Kali tiger reserve. See, all these wildlife sanctuaries, the 5 wildlife sanctuaries actually adjacent to the Kali tiger reserve from Karnataka. So, if you clearly observe on the map, so the Kali tiger reserve particularly is adjacent to all these wildlife sanctuaries. So, this is the Kali tiger reserve that you can clearly see, that is part of northern Karnataka. On the other hand, you can clearly see the wildlife sanctuaries that are there in Goa. So, there is Netravali Wildlife Sanctuary, there is Kotigaon, then there is sort of Bhagwan Mahavir National Park, Mahadevi Wildlife Sanctuary, all these important wildlife sanctuaries are there from the Karnataka. Essentially, Netravali Wildlife Sanctuary is very adjacent to Kali Tiger Reserve from the Karnataka. So, Kali Tiger Reserve, the name has been there because of the Kali river that runs through the tiger reserve. So, essentially very important to understand here the proposition of central committee here. So, what it argues is the area immediately adjacent to Kali tiger reserve can be declared as a core zone, particularly the areas adjoining the Kali's buffer zone can form the buffer zone of Goa's proposed tiger reserve as well. It will minimize the disturbance in this regard. So, you can clearly see the households that will will be submerged, or rather included in the wildlife sanctuary. You can just note down some of these points here. So, Mahadevi Wildlife Sanctuary will be also included in it. So, it is ecologically sensitive, particularly region of the Western Ghats. It integrates Goa's forest with Kali Tiger Reserve. It will create larger contiguous tiger habitat. So, for the perspective of say tiger conservation in this particular region, the formation of tiger reserve will help. So, very important, you can clearly see the issue at hand here, the core versus buffer zone discussion. So, core zone, mainland with the buffer zone, essentially some sort of activity is allowed. Core zone, no any human activity is allowed in the core zone of any biosphere reserve or tiger habitat or tiger reserve even. So, you can clearly see the difference here. So, very important, the human presence none in core, but in buffer zone in regulated manner it is allowed. So, buffer zone, it is to provide a protective shield and transitional space for the core zone. So, core zone, it is an inviolate sanctuary for the wildlife conservation only. So, it is the highest protected level of say it gets the highest level of protection, while buffer zone less strict but still regulated. Obviously, the activities are regulated in buffer zone as well, but core zone it is totally prohibited. So, Kali Tiger Reserve, some of the facts are given here. Obviously, Kali Tiger Reserve from Karnataka, the river Kali flows through it. Very important, tiger population is there in Kali. So, very vital sort of tiger reserve, particularly in the northern Karnataka region. So, this is practice question for you, just comment your answer in the comment section. Let us look at the next article. So, RBI planning monthly release of BOP data. This particular analysis is important. Obviously, on BOP we have the question in prelims. Just look at the question and you can solve the question as well if you want. Particularly important is what exactly is RBI has said now. So, RBI is trying to release the BOP data on a monthly basis. Earlier what it used to do, it used to release, or even now it releases BOP data on a quarterly basis. So, obviously what BOP denotes is, it is a systemic statement of all the transaction of India with the world. So, it has the element of say current account, capital account. I am not going to go too much detail into those aspects, but we are going to see what are the components of BOP now. So, BOP has current account and capital account. You can clearly see there is a current account and there is a capital account. See, you may get a direct question in prelims about what are included particularly in capital account as well as current account. We have all seen the question from 2014 prelims, particularly on the first slide in this particular article. So, current account, export and import of goods, export import of services. So, goods as well as services, export and import is included in the current account of BOP. Remember that. Unilateral transfers and income receipts and payments also. So, transfer payments are also part of current account. Remember, capital account, there are borrowings and lendings, investments, change in foreign exchange reserve is part of say current account, capital account particularly. So, let us look at the specific components now. So, current account, it is the record of trade in goods and services and transfer payments. Remember that. So, essentially these are very important components. Transfer payments, most of the time people may miss this. So, it records all the transactions that relate to the actual receipts and payments of the visible items, invisible items and unilateral transfers. Visible items trade in goods, invisible items obviously trade in services. So, essentially you can clearly see goods and services trade as export as well as import recorded in the current account. Net income factor from abroad, net non-income factor as well. So, transfer payment also are part of current account, like shipping, banking, insurance, tourism, software services, etc. Particularly net non-factor income is counted under the current account of BOP. Remember that. Transfer payments consisting of gifts and remittances, particularly remittances and grants are part of current account. Remember that. Remittances and grants given are part of current account. So, very important. You may get a question directly here. Capital account, what is included in the capital account? So, capital account includes those transactions which cause a change in the assets or liabilities of a countries. So, essentially if anything, if it changes the liability, the transaction, if it changes the liabilities, then it is included in the capital account. This is the simplest way to actually remember. See, investments, FDI, FPI, offshore for that matter, foreign institutional investments or even offshore funds, foreign portfolio investments, FPIs, FDI, equity capitals, reinvested earnings as well as external commercial borrowings are also part of, and short term debt is also part of capital account. External assistance like government aid, intergovernmental, multilateral and bilateral loans are also part of capital account as well. So, remember these important aspects of capital account, very important. So, just comment your answer in the comment section to this particular important question. So as I said, the article itself does not have that much of a substance, but basics of BOP are important. So, the next article is about IMF reclassifying India's foreign exchange regime as crwal-like. So, what exactly is this crwal-like regime? In earlier times, see, rupee is actually touching new lows. So, in recent times we have all seen the update regarding that, but what has the IMF said now, or what has IMF reclassified the RBI's our country's foreign exchange regime now is to crwal-like. What is so essentially earlier it used to describe our foreign exchange regime as stabilized, but now it has said that they are actually reclassifying our exchange regime, particularly currency exchange regime, as a crwal-like. So, we are going to see what is the reason behind it. So, in recent times, we have all seen the exchange rate trends which are extremely volatile. So, essentially Indian rupee has declined 4% over the year so far. Volatility of the rupee has increased. We have all seen it has touched new lows in recent times. IMF, what is the IMF's assessment in this regard? So, India was moved from floating to stabilized for December 22 to November 24 period. That is true. Crwal-like arrangement now, why it has been now declared or reclassified as a crwal-like is because the exchange rate remains within plus minus 2% of statistically identified trend for 6 months or more with few outliers. So, essentially the IMF here argues that if the float even even the managed float, the dirty float, according to that particular assessment also, our exchange system or currency will be much more depreciated. Okay, but that is not the case. RBI somehow is interfering essentially so that there is band in which the currency depreciation may go or currency devaluation may come sort of. So, that band is plus minus 2% with 6 months of statistically sort of identifiable trends. So, what IMF here argues is if the RBI, if the country's currency exchange system is floating or even stabilized, we will see the further depreciation, further fall, further drop in rupees value, but that has not happened. It has dropped manageably. So, that is why it has reclassified India's currency exchange regime, the foreign exchange regime, as crwal-like. That is why because there is this criteria of plus minus 2%, the exchange rate remains within plus minus 2%, and that has been observed with respect to India's own exchange system as well. Such system cannot be considered as a floating. So, essentially this system is not the floating system. Even a managed float, it is not even a dirty float as well. So, it is essentially a peg, that is a crwal-like peg. So, now what has IMF said is it has essentially reclassified India's currency exchange from say floating regime to pegged regime, although a crwal-like regime. So, to certain extent it is a very huge sort of news in this regard, but it is just reclassification of the currency system, currency exchange system in particularly. IMF notes there is room for additional exchange rate flexibility. So, it argues for more flexibility in exchange rate. So, you cannot interfere too much in the exchange rate particularly, because essentially if you let it float, it will actually have its natural sort of growth or natural sort of decline. It will show the real condition vis-a-vis India's currency. So, essentially it bats for better greater exchange rate flexibility. It helps absorb external shocks, that is true. That is what it argues. If you let it, if there is exchange rate flexibility, it will absorb external shocks more sort of in a better way. It reduces the need for costly reserve accumulation, and it encourages market development and deeper financial markets. So, essentially that is why our government or IMF argues for flexible exchange rate system. So, but again India's exchange rate system, many times RBI intervenes. So, that is why it is floating exchange rate, dirty float particularly. Essentially now what IMF is saying is it is the soft peg, crwal-like soft peg. So, there are these are some of the growth forecast, GDP growth forecast given by IMF in this regard. Just go through them, we are not that much important. Apart from that, these are some of the classifications. So, you can clearly see there are hard pegs, no separate legal trend or legal tender. So, it is just pegging to the dollar. So, currency board arrangement is there, then there is a dollarization, Euroanization. So, particularly just not that much important. Soft peg is also very, very important. You can clearly see there is a crawling band. So, there is an crawling band. So, RBI now argues that India's currency exchange system is crawling band under soft peg. So, remember this particular aspect. Floating regime, we have dirty, we have free floating, independent floating, we have managed floating, that is dirty float, and other managed arrangement in this regard are also there. So, some of the important types of the arrangements, the currency exchange arrangements particularly. So, essentially this particular analysis is important. Just know some of the types of the currency exchange regimes here. The IMF's reclassification in this regard is important. The word is important, crwal-like. So, I hope you got the meaning of crwal-like pegging system right here. So, the next important article is about Ahmedabad to host CWG 2030. So, essentially Commonwealth Games, the Ahmedabad will be host. So, Commonwealth essentially very, very important sports related update. Ahmedabad is emerging, is actually bidding for say 2036 Olympics as well. So, we are going to see whether Ahmedabad will get that particular hosting rights of Olympics. But what is clear now is the CWG, the Commonwealth Games of 2030 will happen in Ahmedabad. So, 26 are happening in say Glasgow in this regard. So, essentially the committee with the Commonwealth Sports General Assembly in Glasgow on Wednesday confirmed Ahmedabad as the venue for 2030 Commonwealth Games, particularly very, very important. Another important point I want to mention here is yoga is also one of the sports India has shortlisted in case it wins the rights to host the 2036 Olympics as well. Now, essentially in 2030 we will have yoga as a sport. So, very, very important. Apart from that, badminton, hockey, wrestling, shooting and T20 cricket, all acts from 26 edition are parts of Indian interest that are likely to return in 2030. So, our medal tally may increase or it may improve as well. Earlier we hosted Commonwealth Games in 2010, particularly current Glasgow edition, it is focusing more on cost cutting. That is why it has cut all these important sports in which India may get more medals. So, essentially that is why hosting this particular event in 2030 bodes well for India's overall sports journey. Particularly 2010 Commonwealth Games is one of the most successful for India, in which it won 38 golds. So, in total it won 101 medals. So, very, very historic achievement. In 2022 Birmingham Games, India won 61 medals, but shooting was not part of that particular program. India's prospect for 2026 look bleak because of the non-inclusion of very, very important games associated with India. All 74 members recommended or voted to ratify India's bid for say 2030 Commonwealth Games. So, very, very important. So, Commonwealth Games are an international sort of multi-sport event organized by say the Commonwealth of Nations. Obviously, Commonwealth is associated with the British regime. So, essentially the Commonwealth particularly includes the countries or territories which are earlier ruled by British Empire. So, remember that. So, that is important. Some history here. So, 1930 first games were held in Hamilton, Canada, called the British Empire Games at that point of time. In 1954 British Empire and Commonwealth Games it was formed. Essentially in 1970 British Commonwealth Games were organized. In 1978 they are called Commonwealth Games. So, in 1978 they were called Commonwealth Games. So, some of the important aspect that has been given. Important is to know about say the India and Commonwealth Games. India has participated in since 1934, that is very, very important, particularly first gold Norman pictured 1900 Paris Olympics, but before CWG. So that is true. First CWG gold was there in 1951 in New Delhi. Top performance 2010 Delhi Games, India finished second in medal tally. So 2010 Commonwealth Games were historic with respect to sports in India. Popular sports: shooting, wrestling, boxing, badminton, hockey. These are some of the popular games associated as well.